what sutra were we up to? 4-9 we did?
Let's see. We did 4-7 yesterday.
Oh, we did 4-7.
Mm-hmm. We only did the one yesterday.
Well, we had a nice conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So 4-7, so 4-8. I don't have Satchidananda in this book, so I'm just reading Gyanasvara's translation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, those threefold actions result in latent impressions, vasanas, that will later arise to fruition only corresponding to those impressions. So the impressions match the actions. Whether actions are white, black, or mixed, the resulting deep impressions will also be of a similar nature. They too will be white, black, or mixed. White is actions that are white, good, useful, result in deep impressions that are also white, good, and useful. Black actions are actions that are black, bad, not useful, result in deep impressions that are also black, bad, not useful. Mixed actions are actions that are mixed, shades of gray, result in deep impressions that are also mixed, shades of gray. When those deep impressions once again arise to the surface, driving further action, speech, and thoughts, those two will have similar leanings. They can be altered through sadhana, spiritual practices, and deciding to follow different courses of action. Does anyone have a different translation?
Yeah, Carrera.
Yeah.
Because Satchidananda doesn't have any commentary on that. To understand this sutra, it will be useful to briefly discuss three principles: samskaras, subconscious impressions; karmasaya, depository or karmic residue; vasanas, don't know if I'm saying that right, subliminal personality traits, tendencies, and potentialities that form and help maintain patterns of habit. So samskaras, every thought, word, and deed, whether done consciously or unconsciously, becomes a samskara. Samskaras function as subliminal activators, constantly propelling the conscious mind into further thought and action. Karmasaya, no action or word, no action is without its reaction. All reactions are stored as subtle impressions in the subconscious mind. The receptacle for karma is called the karmasaya. There are three kinds of karma found in the karmasaya, those being expressed and exhausted in this birth. Help me out here. Prarabdha karma, new karma created during this birth. Agami karma, and latent karma waiting to be fulfilled in future births. Sanksita karma. And then vasanas. Vasanas are a subcategory of samskaras. They are subconscious impressions that come together irrespective of their order of creation to create a subset of impressions, a family of related impressions. Since vasanas induce a person to repeat actions, they are sometimes referred as subtle desires. Vasanas form individual personality traits and patterns of habit. They represent self-identity formed under the influence of ignorance, avidya. In other words, personality traits can exist only in an environment which supports the ego sense and the mistaken belief that we are not the Purusha. The coming together of related vasanas in the process that brings forth the karma of this birth, Prarabdha karma, from the karmasaya. The vasanas are in effect channels through which the evolutionary force of Prakriti manifests, expressing as the birth of the individual and the experiences that will be encountered in that life. This explains why we don't always face the results of our current actions in this birth. Karmas need the proper environment to come to fruition. Therefore, some of the karmas we must face are kept in abeyance by the time, the point in history, of our birth, and by our current environment, social status, and place. The time necessary for fulfillment of these karmas could extend from minutes or hours to days, years, or lifetimes. Only when the circumstances are appropriate will a karma surface. The practical teaching of this sutra is that environment is an extremely important factor in spiritual growth. Vasanas of gambling will find the surroundings of a monastery inhospitable. On the other hand, spiritual vasanas will have a difficult time germinating in Las Vegas casinos. Okay. And then it says, experience it. As the saying goes, as you think, so you become. It is very beneficial to create a home environment that supports yoga practice. With this in mind, stroll through the rooms of your home. Note the kind of pictures and decorations that adorn your living space. Take an inventory of your music and book collection, noting which types you have on hand. Is your environment uplifting? Does it inspire you to be a better, more loving, compassionate, clear-thinking person? Yogis can benefit by taking a hint from those who aspire to Olympic gold. The walls of their rooms are crowded with pictures of past champions. The first thing they see upon awakening and the last thing they see before retiring will be their heroes and heroines. Similarly, our living space should contain at least some pictures, paintings, or statues of great sages and saints, deities, serene landscapes, or uplifting sayings. We should also take care concerning the people with whom we socialize. Do our associates partake in negative activities, gossiping, backbiting, and so on? Do they influence our thinking and behavior in ways that do not support yoga's objective of having an easeful body, a peaceful mind, and a useful life? We do not have to abandon our associations in order to practice yoga, but we should heighten our awareness of the influence they have on our happiness. A non-conducive environment, if sufficiently detrimental, can undermine our spiritual life. On the other hand, practice and non-attachment performed in the proper environment produce fruits more quickly. Wow.
That was a great description.
It really was. And having that kind of practical, I like that, the practical advice added to it.
Yeah.
It's nice.
Vasana it reminds me of like neural connections, right? If you smell something and it triggers the memories from your childhood or something.
Or hear a piece of music and it brings you back.
Yeah. And that's actually, I love when I don't know something. I've never heard of Vasana before.
Oh.
And it's like that just adds an extra layer to the dimension of how they're describing the psychology of a human that my whole circle's been talking about recently. Like, was it yesterday, 2 days ago? We were driving in the car and my husband had an issue with a client, and I was like, well, don't take it too hard. It's fine. You'll be fine. Just plow forward and you'll be okay. And, you're not defined by that thing that happened. I was like, really like, and he didn't say anything. And then we got to my mom's house, and later on in the evening, my sister like revealed something very, very, she was like, she's trying to develop herself as a human, and she was trying to be vulnerable with my mother. My mother was doing the same thing to her. And I'm standing there like, you're not listening. You're not listening to her. She's getting upset because you're not hearing her. She's like, I'm listening. And then she was like lecturing her and telling her to get over it, essentially. So I got in the car afterwards and I said to my husband, I'm like, I'm sorry I did that to you earlier. And I was realizing that like our whole personality is completely based on just the things that we saw. Like it's all an illusion. We think it's like something we own, but it's really, it's just the things that we've seen over and over and over again that we normalize and try to make sense of, like, oh, this is how the world is. And like a part of that egolessness that we've been sort of exploring in these talks is letting go of hold on, like, okay, there's that personality trait. It wasn't serving him in the moment for me to be doing that to him. So that's something I have to let go of. But like when we're so attached to the way that we want to be because of the way we've seen, it's like when you see that your actions are harming someone, you won't let go of them. You'll be like, no, I was right.
Oh, yeah.
So like the yoga practice has been really revealing for like just the attachments get so subtle.
Mm.
We think we're attached to our house and our kids and our money, and like, even if all that were to go, there are like these subtle things that are causing suffering to us and others that we're not even cognizant of. Like, that's why this is great that this is coming today, like just adds another dimension, Vasana.
Yeah. When you were reading, Amanda, and in the Satyananda translation, and in the one that you were reading, the talk about the black and white, I noticed that Carrera didn't do that.
Yeah.
And just in today's climate,
Yeah, I was thinking that too.
It's not an appropriate way to label things.
Yeah.
You've done it for so long that it's become it's become a thing, just what we think of as white as good and black as evil, or as bad, and it's something we have to move away from.
Mm-hmm.
I find, it was yesterday I was listening to an education discussion yesterday evening, and they were talking about equity in education, and they mentioned a study of it was done quite a long time ago, but of children being of black children, black and white children, but the what was revealing was the black children were given dolls and things to play with, and the black children said that the white dolls were good and the black dolls were bad. Already at that age, at that very young age, they had already absorbed that.
I just saw that video. It is a crushing video.
It's awful, right?
Yeah, it's crushing. And these kids, some of them, I think were as young, I don't know, 4, but definitely 5. And
I was listening to it and I was like, oh my God, that's just unbearable to imagine that's because we don't know how children think. It's awful.
Mm-hmm. And these were just direct questions to the kids, and they were very simple, and there was nothing artificial about, well, I mean, it was a study, so it was set up, but you kept on hearing this over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. And one of the interesting things was following this a couple of sessions later, there is a bias test that you can take, and I can't remember which university did it. I will look it up and I'll send out a link, but there's actually a collection of bias tests. So there's 13 or 14 of them, and one of them that you can take is about what internal, maybe unconscious biases do you have about race. Mm-hmm. So I've always considered I knew I was racist somewhere, because I'm white in America. How could I not be? Mm-hmm. Well, if you live in America, I don't care what color you are. This permeates your life. Mm-hmm. And I did this exercise, which took about 20 minutes or so, and I come out at the end as I thought I would be like minimally biased. No, I'm moderately biased, and it's interesting because the studies indicate that it's really hard to change that kind of internal bias. But what you can do is set up situations so that bias is less likely to affect future actions.
Right.
So long ago and far away, women didn't play in classical orchestras. If you look at old videotapes, it's all white men, and usually old white men. And when women started pushing for their place in these major orchestras, what they found that they had to do was they set up screens on stage, and people auditioned for seats in the orchestra behind the screen so that you couldn't tell whether
that why you do that now? I had no idea that's why you audition that way.
This started decades ago, and
that's so
I don't
interesting.
know. Yeah, and I also think it might, it has other benefits as well. I mean, by the time you're auditioning for a major orchestra, you've probably auditioned 10 times already someplace else, and some of the people listening might have heard, and they might already be predisposed for or against you. So it doesn't hurt anybody to do this. But anyway, so that's one example of how you can remove the environmental situation that would lead towards a biased decision. But anyway, so yeah, Jackie, I saw that, and I was just, it was chilling.
And you know, I've been trying to do work around my own biases, you know, based because I have to, and I don't see the district doing anything about it for us. We have had basic, you know, basic stuff a couple of years ago that we had to, you know, it was called, you know, bias training, but I to look at implicit biases, and everybody kind of just like wasn't interested in doing it. I remember when we did it, and I'm hoping that the district, because there's got to be we have to do work in this. Long Beach is a very, very, very diverse community, and we have to do better. And there's got to be ways that we can.
Do you know
It didn't show us at how we are failing the Black and brown children in our classrooms.
Right.
Then if we didn't see that and say we have to do something about it, but shame on us.
Do you know the materials by the Southern Poverty Law Center for early childhood approaches to deal with
No.
bias, et cetera? Well, Southern Poverty Law Center is a terrific organization, and they've been around for quite a while. But they've produced, I used to have them, and I think I gave them away. They have a bunch of materials that you might find interesting and useful. I'm sure there's more current stuff out there too, you know, that would be helpful. But
this webinar that my friend and I have been tuning into, it's every night this week for 2 hours, which is a big chunk of time, and it's from 4 till 6, which is a little hard.
Oh yeah.
Amazing, the last 2 nights, by Defending the Early Years. It's a group called Defending the Early Years, and I've been looking into more of their stuff, and then all the links that they're giving us, it's all stuff that we haven't known about. And Mary Jane and I are 2 educators who have searched out our own professional development for many years on early childhood, and this is a lot of stuff that's new to us, so it's quite exciting that we're getting it, you know. But I'll look up this as well.
Yeah, maybe it'll be helpful. Yeah.
We have to be aware of our word usage. Like, just you know, back to the sutra again. I just think we have to be aware of our words.
Yeah, I agree. It shouldn't have a negative connotation. It's just a color.
Right.
We're just like creating another samskara on the color, and like that has to be let go of. But there's something else you said, like directly aligns with what Sue's saying about like changing the environment. It makes me think of you know, when people walk into the yoga studio for the first time, up until that point they're like, oh wow, this is so different, and then all of a sudden after a couple of weeks they become like so wildly spiritual. It's like all of a sudden everything kind of unravels of like the way they were living before, and it's almost like it wakes up. And I often say that, like, I'm not teaching you anything you don't already know, really. Like you're just remembering things that are essential truths of your existence. And it's like, if the environment is right, then it's going to bring up different samskaras. So, I mean, like, all of us have been sitting in this pot of the American environment, which is like so systemically racist and sexist and problematic. I think it's kind of a positive thing that all the systems are breaking down. Like, it's awful to experience all the systems breaking down like this, but maybe we can set up one that, like what you're saying, has equity and will create those, or sort of bubble up those vasanas of equity. It's like, if we change the environment. And it's interesting because, like, we think like, oh, if I am a spiritual being, then I can just like exist in the spiritual and not be affected by the material. But some of my teachers have said to me that the soul, or Atman, has an affinity for both the spiritual and material, and that's why we incarnated here, because we can sort of like shift back and forth from experiencing the spiritual and experiencing the material, and experiencing the spiritual and experiencing the material. And, you know, what are we absorbed in, really? And I think that there's a lot to be said for not spiritually bypassing, and like actually dealing with the environment.
Mm-hmm.
And like if the environment is safe. Like we've actually, I don't like advertise it a lot, but we've done a lot of this kind of work with the structure of the business at Rev. And it has yielded a more diverse population because they feel safe, but the environment has to produce that. So it's like it's not just the school systems, it's like it's every single system. Like even the yoga systems in America have failed in this respect. It's like every single system has failed. Well, my husband always, he's like so optimistic about America all the time. Like since I met him, he always says America always does the right thing. It just takes them exceedingly longer than everybody else. It's like they do the right thing eventually.
Well, it's like children. We have to make our own mistakes, and America's a young country, so
yeah, that's probably has a lot to do with it, right?
Our own mistakes and learn from them. So
it's a young, dysfunctional country.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Any other things?
I think about that tidy book that I always go back to from Parigraha.
Mm-hmm.
And like I did that book a few years ago in my house, and it just made me think, like with this sutra, that to me was more about like non-hoarding.
Mm-hmm.
The non-attachment is also huge, because you think about like how you learn things and then you set up your house. At least this was for me. And then I set up my house the way I thought I wanted it set up, the way I thought I should set it up. And then when I did the practice of pausing, and it's almost like starting at the very beginning of unlearning. Like I didn't want this in my house just because this person gave it to me, or I didn't want this color curtain just because it was on sale, and I didn't want this shower curtain just because someone gave it to me. I mean, these are all like real things. I had to pause and like look in my room and touch every object. And like I spent a lot of time home even before COVID. I mean, and now think about everything you're absorbing just in your own house, and you're learning from it every day. And like my house is not a diverse house. There's no colorful like art from people of color. There's none, like there's just none of that diversity. Like you walk in here and you'll be like, oh yeah, a white person lives here. And it's like I have to, and like why don't I like that kind of stuff? Because I'm not drawn to it, but it's because I've never learned to even study it to enjoy it. And like I have bought a few. I didn't overwhelm myself, but since COVID, I mean since the George Floyd more awareness of the Black Lives Movement, I supported a Black author, a Black owned bookstore in Brooklyn. I bought a few books on anti-racism written by Black authors, just to add diversity to my house, but also to educate myself. And like, it's like, then I have to do that to my Facebook feed. You know, I have to like, I have to learn here at my home before I can even step outside and even begin to bring it into work and yoga studio and nonprofits. And that's what I'm doing. Like I'm self-aware of that, and I'm trying to do that. And but yeah, it starts like with like you have to start with yourself. And like you all are saying, like we have to admit that there's all bias and racism in us, and that's fair. Like we can't beat ourselves up over that, but that's how we learned. We can just keep blaming our parents.
It's not just parents. It is the very structure of our country.
Oh, I know. I'm totally joking.
Yeah, I mean, you know, our parents are in the same. We're in the same position that we are in. It is in the, I swear, the very air we breathe. And I think that's why it's so hard to change, because there were a couple of things that my parents taught me that I completely discarded at a certain age and have never gone back to. So it's, I mean, I guess I'm grabbing on that because it is a different level of a struggle almost, to be aware and to try to avoid situations that continue to foment that kind of, or support that kind of structure. It's a little depressing to think about because it's so ingrained.
Mhm.
It's,
Yeah.
you can be, how many rebirths will it take to get rid of it, you know?
Right.
But
Yeah,
at least we're
confront it.
starting, you know, at least it's starting.
Yes, that's what I think. At least people,
Yes,
at least
yeah.
some people are doing the work themselves, like we are, but and other people are. It makes me sad when I feel like there's lots of people though who are not, and important people who are not. And
I say this, like, I started practicing yoga probably around 30 to 33. I can't remember exactly. Probably whatever, it doesn't matter. But then I think about like, oh, the people that started practicing when they were like teenagers or even younger. At least I started.
Mhm.
And you think about like the white people that supported Martin Luther King Jr., and there probably weren't that many of them, but they probably felt like, oh, I wish more people would be on board. And I feel like now at least there not everyone, but there probably are more people than ever doing the work. And people have always been doing the work. It's finally just like that I'm
Yeah.
doing the work. So
Yes.
now I'm aware. Now I'm like, oh, this is what yoga, you know, like it's like that same awakening.
Mhm.
But at least I'm starting now. And I can't like worry that not everyone's doing it. Just like I wish everyone did yoga. They'll wake up when they wake up.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that practice, the
And
tiny practice, it really helped me like learn to let go and not be attached, and learn that I can enjoy this material item, but I can't be attached to it if it breaks, or, you know, if somebody else comes in my house and is like, I love this. And I'm like, just take it home with you type of thing. You know, I had my share of it, you take it. And it's so powerful because it's really hard for me when I started it, but now it's so much freer when I walk out of my house because I've had so much practice of surrounding myself with positivity and joy and being able to let go of things and not attach myself to them. But this was like my beginner practice.
So if you think about the boson field in quantum physics, that everything is atoms flowing into atoms. Like what you were saying, Sue, about like you have to really pay attention, and like it's really hard and almost depressing to have to like pay such intense attention and change so many things about it. It's like the attention that the yogis placed on this understanding of the material. It's just reminding me of Vastu, Pam, what you're saying. It's like feng shui has a similar idea, but different rules. So feng shui talks about how energy moves through matter and how the way you arrange it will influence the way energy flows. So the yogis talk about Vastu, and it would be this like attention to the arrangement of structures, like not just societal structures in the Vedas, but like physical structures in the Vedas. Like if you go to these temples in India that are thousands of years old, the intention of how they placed the entrance, the pillars, the statues, like the way the energy flows through those spaces, and like you can't really understand it till you're standing in one, but it's like so powerful the way energy flows through. And like Pam, what you're saying about like that consciousness to like not having too much clutter is like her whole thing, and only having things that you really love. Like it's so powerful in its practices, but it's still so on the surface of like how deep you can go into this arrangement of matter. If you guys didn't know about Vastu, that's like a whole other interesting philosophy thing. Like they would build the entire building around this knowledge about physics and mathematics and the way that energy flows. Like think about when you go into nature. Was it Da Vinci or Michelangelo? I'm brain farting. Who discovered the golden mean? that all of nature has the same mathematical equation. And when we look at something that we perceive as very beautiful, it often really corresponds to the mathematical equation. I think it's like 3.14, and it goes on. And like even the ratio of our own bodies corresponds to that mathematical equation. And if you think about the physical spaces that we're in, like some architecture that we're living in is like very not aligned with nature. It actually like makes you feel bad to be in the space because it's so far off. And like a lot of this yoga stuff is getting us back to our original nature, right? So like when you go into a forest and you're with just nature, there's like this sort of rambling beauty in it, right? It's like just existing as it is, but it looks so beautiful. Like if you look into the distance of a meadow, or like you're just walking through the woods, there's like this symmetry, this beauty to everything. Like if you're looking off into the ocean or into a lake, or you know what I mean, like it's, or just a field of flowers. Like, you know, I spend so much time in my garden like arranging all the things to make it look just right, but nature can literally just like plop it down. And it's gorgeous, and it makes you feel so relaxed and so good and so easeful, and like all this auspiciousness comes from it. So like even within the way that they structure like the intentional building of something, like I think like we're talking about like the emotional structure and the societal structures of America. I think America is hideous too. It's just hideous. Like the physical structure of America. Like think about, what was it, like the 80s? The way they would build things, and like, you know, we're still living in those physical structures. Like it could just get so subtle of like how that affects the consciousness. And in the sutra, he's talking about like your environment and the people you're hanging around with. We could take it even further than that, which I think is like interesting. So we could align better with nature. Yeah, it makes me want to like knock my house down and just like build it from scratch.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you just gotta, like, I feel like what you were saying, like when I walk in my house, every time I feel gratitude, it's like that field of flowers, and it's just material stuff, but it's like you're holding each item in your hand, and you're like, and now I could do it again now and have learned so much between the first time and the second time. But now I'll see something and I'm like, nope, this has got to go. Or now you look at stuff and you're like, why? I guess where I was going with it today in this sutra is, not only does this bring me joy, like that's the surface level. I hear that, but now it's like, why does it bring me joy? Like, what did I learn, and what do I need to unlearn for this item, and why? Like I guess that's more where I was going. And then you can even just appreciate it more, and you don't have to move things around every time. Like I used to move things around all the time. Now everything has its place and it stays. Not because I'm being strict with myself, because that's where it belongs.
I wonder if it's like an intuitive thing, you know, like they say certain paintings or certain like faces are just by multitudes of people considered more beautiful or pleasing or bring more joy.
I'm thinking about those 4-year-olds in that video, like, and the white doll is pretty and the black doll's not, you know, like where, you know, like what in my house am I brainwashed to think because of, that's more what I'm thinking. And that's like a whole nother level of unlearning things. And I'm not saying that I shouldn't like things because I'm white. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying, what did I learn to like?
I get what you're saying. Yeah.
I'm white. So that's it.
Yeah.
Like I looked at I straightened up my social media a little bit, and I probably have a lot more work to do there. But you look at my to read and read list, and it probably was majority white authors. And it wasn't because I wasn't against reading Black authors. It's just like it wasn't put in my face to read them. They're not showing up on the New York Times bestsellers. They're not showing up on my social media because I'm not following them. And, you know, like I would read one popular book, which I never tend to like, whether it's white or Black author. And then I'd hate, you know, like it just whatever. But now I'm reading some, and I'm reading one right now I can't put down. But that's more of where I was going with it, like systemic racism showing up in my own house just with my material items.
Yeah, I hear you. And that's interesting what you're bringing up about social media, because they have those algorithms, And it's almost like exacerbating bias.
Oh, that was a whole part of the first movement. That was like, I was like, remember when it first started and I was like, I'm going to be silent right now. I actively followed, like it was showing up and then like they did a whole takeover, and I was just keep trying to follow different people so that my feed wasn't just like I wanted a more diverse feed. So I spent time doing that. I probably should spend more time doing that, because you're scrolling all day, and what are you reading? You're reading what you have filtered yourself to read.
Right. It's another material manifestation. Social media, like it's a new material manifestation, but it's still a material manifestation that affects the consciousness.
Yeah. So you have to make, like, diversity isn't going to happen on its own. It's something we have to force to happen.
Yes.
I mean, you have to be proactive about it, and you have to start with yourself, and you have to start with, like, I don't make any like crazy dinners, like multicultural dinners in my house. I don't necessarily like watch, like, it's just, this is what I'm geared to, but I can take a pause and I can try new things. I don't have to like it, but I can be aware of it, at least, I guess. I don't know.
That's the benefit of travel.
Oh yeah, no, for sure.
It's like,
and
it
like
exposes you to all the new cultures and makes you realize that like the world is not your little perception of it, right?
Or even like looking at my pictures, like I do have Black friends, but are they showing up in any of the picture frames in my house? I don't think so. Like, and that's sad to me right now that I'm thinking about it. And I'm not doing that. I'm not doing it meanly. It's just it just shows up that way. And that's not good.
Yeah, a lot of it's innocent, right? Like some of it's really overtly not innocent, but I think like we're talking about a lot of people now who didn't realize all the systemic racism. Like a lot of what they did was very innocent, so it's so hard to confront. It's like the ego.
They say this is the worst one.
Mm.
Like if you're actively racist, like KKK, that's very awful. But at least like where you stand. But for someone like me, where I'm like, I had no idea what, like, the
I mean, I wouldn't go that far, Pam. I think someone in the KKK is way worse than you having an innocent bias.
They were, no, I know, but they're because I think there's more people that fall in this bucket, this silent, I don't want to paraphrase, but it's like this silent racism or whatever. I forget what they were calling it. But I can see how it was very hurtful.
Yeah, it becomes harmful. Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah.
Well, the worst part is that
a lot of good people who are not yet willing to, are not ready yet to acknowledge their part in it.
Well, that was me 6 months ago, so I can't be mad at that person.
No,
like I have to.
It's my husband right now, and he's a good, loving person who would never hurt anybody. Doesn't matter, and he'll say that. So he'll say, I'm not racist. I would never do anything harmful to anybody, whether they're Black or white or any color. And I agree with him. He's right. But he won't, when I've tried to have conversations about acknowledging white privilege, he kind of shuts me down. He gets frustrated and he shuts me down. And so I'm letting it go.
Yes.
Yeah.
Not a place to push it with him. I will just change things that I do the best that I can. And he said to me, so what are you going to be able to change in your classroom? I said, I'm going to do more for the Black children than I've done before. I've always treated everybody equally in my class. Always. It's been very important to me. But I'm going to he said, you're going to do more for the Black children than the white children? And I said, yes. And he said, don't let anybody hear you say that. Don't let white parents know that you're doing that. And I said, but we have to, because it's not equal yet. And if we don't make it equal by doing more, then it never will become equal. There is not equity there. And yes, I'm going to do more.
Maybe you need to change his environment. Because I would have like these conversations. My husband's like very pragmatic. Well, the statistics say this for a long time. And then this recent trip he took to Detroit, because they're investing in Detroit. Like I have been carrying on and on for probably 2 years now, like you have to help the people that you're investing in their properties. Like, they're in terrible poverty that was like cast upon them. You have to make community gardens there. You have to fix it up. You have to give them education. You have to give them psychological help, right? And he's like, well, okay, well, maybe you can spirit, right? And he was never like, he was always open to it, but it was his last trip there to Detroit. He drove there a couple of weeks ago to look at some of the properties and like deal with repairs and stuff, because like their company's very conscious of like making sure people have good living environments, no matter like, even if they're under the poverty level. And he said he went into this one house, this woman, and she was so poor, and she had all these kids, and there were just like diapers from weeks ago all over the house. And it was like she was like obviously depressed, and her energy was really low, and he came home and he was like very affected. And he's like, it was so different than like when I was in Nepal. The poverty level in Nepal is very bad, but it's like they're still happy. They don't have that like deep depression. I'm like, because they didn't have their culture stripped from them. They weren't like systemically oppressed and traumatized. Like, this is an entirely different thing in America with like slavery actually does really still affect, it's intergenerational trauma, and they're being held down still. And he's like, I got to do something. I'm going to do something. I'm going to help all those people. Like, it really, and it was just like, he had to be put in the environment, because like we're in our nice houses and we're safe and we have food and we have heat. Like, we don't know. You got to like put him in the environment. You got to see that other environment.
In the 60s, Bobby Kennedy took a trip through some southern states and also some cities, because he didn't really understand the poverty and the impact, the long-term impact that slavery has had on people. It changed his life, and it changed how he approached things. Did you know that Bobby Kennedy was one of the attorneys in the House Un-American Activities Committee, who going after leftists and communists, et cetera. And he went after Pete Seeger, even when his brother was elected president and Bobby was appointed attorney general. He went after Pete Seeger. He went on this tour. It changed his life. It changed his purpose, to the degree that he was considered the most liberal presidential candidate when he was assassinated. And I agree with you, to see it, and to spend, not just to look at a picture, but to spend time there, to feel the despair, the lack of hope, I think if that doesn't change it, I'm not sure what will.
Because good people, they're gonna see like, this person's suffering. I can't allow this suffering to go on. But when you're removed from it, like, nobody can understand, right? Nobody understands until they're either in the position or.
I also think that it's a matter of comfort. We all like our comfort, and whether or not you say out loud you like your comfort, we all like it. And if you have something like that in your face, it is incredibly uncomfortable. It is incredibly painful, and you can turn and walk away. I think there's people who turn and walk away. But I think, if you're in my house, I have this nice little quiet office. If you're in my house, you're in my room. Who wants to introduce that pain and discomfort? Whereas it was his environment. He was tossed into, Kennedy was tossed into this environment where he had to go. It was a political necessity, and it ended up being a philosophical, life-changing experience for him. So I think a lot of it has to do with comfort, because certainly ever since the 50s, immediately post-World War II, nothing that is being said now about the impact of slavery, et cetera, everything that we just talked about has been left unsaid since then. And it was said good and loud, but people didn't pay attention. This is not a matter of, when some African Americans, when whites say, oh, well, I didn't know, and you thank you for waking me up, and some of them say, why the F didn't you know? We've been talking about this since 1953. I mean, and some of that anger is quite justified, but I can totally understand your husband's experience. I mean, I didn't grow up rich. There were 8 of us, and my father went bankrupt twice, et cetera, et cetera. So, not a lot of money flying around. But it wasn't until I did some stuff in college, and I saw some real poverty, that I realized how incredibly entitled I was. For one thing, I was in college. I went to a high school that said, you got good grades, you got a brain, you go. We'll find a place for you to go. And well, anyways, it's the personal thing that is most awakening.
Yeah, same thing for me. It was like traveling to third world countries made a huge impact on my mind and my understanding of the world. And then like as soon as I got my yoga certification, me and a friend started a non-for-profit where we went into these schools where they were homes for Black boys who come from just so much suffering, so much suffering. And that was like just being with them and trying to teach them. And that really opened my eyes. And that was like right at the beginning of my whole like real coming into the yoga world. And like from that moment on, I think that's what informed the whole like, no, I don't want just white people in the space. I love white people, but like, everyone needs yoga. Everyone needs awareness of the self and like equal access to it in some capacity. And like, if they don't see themselves reflected in the staff and they don't see themselves like in the space, they're not gonna feel safe. If they come into a space and it's not diverse, they're never gonna feel safe. They're gonna feel like, oh, this is another place that's gonna cause me suffering because of all this implicit bias that everybody's denying exists. And it's just like heartbreaking. Yeah, the whole thing's heartbreaking. So, I mean, this is like an awful moment, but I think it's good everybody's so uncomfortable, like what you're saying, Sue. It's really good everyone's so uncomfortable. Because otherwise, how would this get through?
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like what I said before about the ego. It's like the ego wants you to be comfortable, even at the expense of whatever else.
Right. My husband says, he came from a very poor background, and has worked very, very hard for what he has. And he'll say that I deserve to have what I have. I've worked really, really hard. I had to get out of a situation that, I had to make a conscious choice to leave and get out and do something different, and did it. And I said, but you were able to do it because you were right. You were able to do it. And he's like, but when I went to England, I was treated, Irish people are treated really poorly in England, even now. And I said, so you chose to come to America. You had that choice and you were able to do it. And I chose to, I came to America, and we're immigrants, we're white immigrants. And that's a whole different category when you're talking about bias, because we came to New York, and he can use his Irish accent for, to open doors.
It's true.
Yeah.
And he has. So we have to, acknowledge that. And he does. He kind of, I guess he'd acknowledge that. You can't take away from the fact that he's right, that he's worked really, really hard, and he's like, I deserve to have what I have because I've worked really hard for it. Nobody gave this to me. Nobody handed this to me. I say, no, you're right. We both worked really hard, and we do, and that's good. And we've taught our children that hard work is what's most important. But we can't deny that the fact that we're white has given us privilege. That if like my younger son so totally gets it. He was trying to say to his dad, he says, remember when he had a little blip with police year ago? Him and his friend were caught with fake IDs, and so he had to go to court. And he said that would have been a whole different scenario if I had been Black.
Mhm.
That would have been completely different if I had been Black. The whole, from beginning to end, the stop with the police, the situation in court, because he was in Hempstead and he was watching. He sat there while he was in court and watched, and it really affected him. He said that would have been completely different had I been Black. He said, and I don't have to worry about my life every time I walk out the door. And she
Right.
said, my husband said, that's just being dramatic. And Gavin's like, it's not. It's dramatic. That's the reality. That's not being dramatic. So my husband's still in a place where he's not ready to lose his comfort. And I get it. I get why, because his life growing up was not comfortable. And he has worked very hard to make sure that his children have a different life than he had. He had a really rough time. So I get it, and I'm not going to push him. I'm just going to let him be who he is. He's not doing great harm. You know, there's harm because we're not acknowledging. There's always harm being done when you don't acknowledge, and you don't take action to change. But he's not doing great harm. He's a good person. I'm going to let it go, and I'll just keep doing what I do, and those things gradually just start. And my son as well, you know. So we'll just keep doing what we can do. That's my bottom line on everything. As Pam keeps saying, you do the best you can do with the tools you have until you know better, and then you do better, right? So I keep that quote forefront in my mind. Do the best we can with the tools we have.
Yeah, and there's not too many tools here. I mean, everybody's drowning. That's the problem. Like, there's this egoic view of like, I have this. If somebody else gets it, is it going to get taken away from me?
Right.
So why does everybody deserve to have the same thing? And it's like, that's the problem of the society. That's the problem of the culture. Like, if we go back to like Vedic, really ancient Vedic culture, like the society was set up to help everybody thrive. It wasn't, it's a mess. It's a mess. I mean, like, I get it too. I get what he's feeling that way, but yeah, I think maybe a change, go volunteer somewhere and drag them with you. And yeah, because it's so preposterous. Some of these things are so preposterous that they're going on that it's hard for your mind to be like, this is actually happening to people. It's terrible. Well, on that note, let's do pranayama because it's 8:32. Okay, take your right hand and fold the peace fingers into the center of the palm. Close off your right nostril with your thumb, left nostril with the ring finger. Inhale through both nostrils and exhale through both. Inhale through your left nostril, close up both, exhale through your right. Inhale through the right, close up both, exhale through the left. Inhale through the left, close up both, exhale through the right. Inhale through the right, close off both, exhale through the left. Inhale through the left, close off both, exhale through the right. Inhale through the right, close off both, exhale through the left. Inhale through the left, close off both, exhale through the right. Inhale through the right, close off both, exhale through the left. And continue on your own for a few cycles of breath. And then when you're ready, you can come to your meditation. You can take the hands to prayer, bowing the head. Namaste. Thank you, ladies. Always a nice way to wake up in the morning, chatting with girls.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Enjoy your day.
You
Too.